Hello, everybody. I'm Michael Blackwell from St. Mary's County, Maryland, which is southeast of Washington, D.C. I'd like to talk about two possible futures. One future is one in which reading is a commodity that is locked behind paywalls. It's aimed at individuals and not libraries because that's the way companies can make the most money. And content is never actually owned by anybody there. It is licensed always. The other one, a bright future, is one in which public libraries are doing what they've been doing for centuries, which is sharing materials while fairly compensating their creators. It's hardly radical, but I'm going to argue that we're going to have to fight to get that future. Fight for the future. I wonder if there's an organization that does that. Well, ownership for public libraries. You're kidding. Own ebooks? I don't think so. That is, however, changing fairly recently here, and I'd like to mention two particular companies. One is PM Press, and there's a nice quote there from Ramsey. We're not above profit making. It's with sales that we pay our salaries. We actually believe in the information we are selling. We want to make it accessible. Or Brickhouse Publishing, and that's with Maria Bastillos. If you're not following Maria's activities in this sphere, you really should. I'd also like to use this as an opportunity to thank all the mostly medium and small size publishers who are giving libraries a fair shake in the digital realm. There are many who are pleased to work with libraries, who work very well with libraries, and are giving libraries terms that are sustainable. Unfortunately, most of the largest publishers are not in that category. So basically, to follow what Michelle said, let's give some specific examples from public libraries to see what the effects those changes that she mentioned have brought about. I'd like to thank three colleagues: Lisa Saley of Ocean State Library, Kathy Mason of Columbus Metropolitan Library, and Carmi Parker of Whatcom, all of whom have contributed to the statistics that I'm going to be giving you. So, titled The #1 Ladies Detective Agency, a popular sort of mystery series. In 2010, you could get this title for $14 perpetual access. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to necessarily keep it together. You keep it for you didn't own it, but as long as they were offering it, you had it. In 2013, some pretty major changes started happening with all the larger publishers. Prices went up astronomically. And I'm not saying that $14 perpetual access was necessarily a fair deal for publishers, but they responded pretty forcefully with some pretty darn high prices. So in 2013, this same book, $44.85 perpetual access. I hope you got it then, because in 2018, of course, HarperCollins had already gone over to a metered access in 2012, but in 2018, all of the others in ebooks went to a metered license. That same book is now $44.85 for a 2-year license. So let's consider some long-term costs. Let's say you got that book in 2013 and you wanted to have it for 20 years. That would cost you $44.85 and you'd still have access. Let's say you got it this year and you wanted to keep it for 10 years, you'd spend $224.25. And at the end of that, you still wouldn't have access because your 5 licenses would have expired. These are the current ebook and digital audiobook terms from the big 5 publishers. You see that with ebooks, none of them are offered on a perpetual license. And I'm not saying that perpetual license is the be all and end all. Let's say with that other book, you said at the end of 10 years, okay, I don't want to license it anymore. And I was only wanting it for a short time. A short-term metered license can be of benefit, but that perpetual access is always an option that we in public libraries would like to have. And in ebooks from the big 5, it has completely disappeared. With digital audiobooks, 3 of them are still offering a perpetual access, 1 user, 1 copy. But I'm hearing nasty rumors that that's going to be going away and we can expect it all to become metered. At least one of the big publishers during the pandemic, Penguin Random House, says, give us some options. They also offering a 1-year metered license on ebooks and pay per use. Same thing for their audio books. That 1-year license for something that's going to be popular in a hurry at a much lower price, that's not a bad deal. Their pay per use is kind of ruinously priced. It's 1/10 the cost of the full access. So think $9.50, $10.50 per use. That's not something most libraries can sustain. And if you look overall, in some cases, and I point to this, the Publisher's Price Watch on the website readersfirst.org, you can see a comparison of print versus digital. And the average retail price that a library might pay, often getting a steep discount, of course, through a jobber, versus the average price we're paying for Overdrive. In some publishers, Scholastic, it's about half again as much. Yeah, with a print book, you're going to have to, put stickers on it. You're going to have to shelve it. You're going to have to ship it between libraries if you've got more than one system. So that might be a pretty darn good deal in some instances. And HarperCollins not looking too bad there. But go up to the rest of the big five and you start seeing at least 3 to 4 times the cost for a digital compared to print. They weren't going out of business with print. They're still not going out of business with print. Why so high on digital? Because in ways that Michelle laid out, they can. These are the average cost of some different ebooks and audiobooks. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, but again, usually some different publishers. We're kind of acting as consumer reports for these groups with Readers First. So Baker Publishing, Sourcebooks, Disney Books, and Workman. With ebooks or audiobooks, no expiration on those licenses, so they're perpetual. At a 13%, maybe even a half again markup, those are some pretty darn good deals when you consider the flexibility of digital. But look at the bottom of the list with Penguin Random House, Bloomsbury, Scholastic, and again, Bloomsbury with e-audio and ebook at 2 times the price, almost 4 times the price. Why the huge markup? These are not sustainable costs for libraries over time. And it just keeps getting worse. We've also taken a look at the rising of prices from 2020 till late last year, late 2022. And you see that from 2020 to 2022, most of the big five have gone up on an average of about 15%. So costs keep going up. Where are we then? Well, I'm going to argue that big five titles and often digital whole are becoming unsustainable for libraries. There are pay-per-use models out there that offer great availability. You can always get the title, but they can be budget busters, and often the price on a per-circ basis is not particularly competitive. Now, some good news is that independent publishing is on the rise, and they may offer more affordable costs for high quality materials, but there are challenges in the discovery and marketing of those. So what about that thriving market that the publishers and a group like the American Association of Publishers always talks about that public libraries have with ebooks? Yes, we've seen a huge increase in use, but it's becoming unsustainable. And the limiting factors there are primarily cost, although those disappearing, exploding, non-permanent licenses are contributing to this. But especially cost is an issue. For example, the most recent Stephen King audiobook is $139 for 2 years. Libraries mostly suffer because our newer, midterm, and especially diverse authors aren't going to get the representation that we'd really like to give them when there's this huge demand for these big best-selling titles. We know those are going to circulate. Some of these others, we're going to spend almost as much money on. We just don't know if they're even going to circulate. And so they become much riskier sort of propositions. No one license suits every need. What we really need from the publishers are going to be a variety of models, including some long-term license. We're going to talk in a second here about academic libraries with Sarah, so I won't mention that, but I will say that school libraries are facing similar challenges, especially in video music and in classroom sets. So how are libraries responding? In some cases, what we're having to do is get very creative about our hold ratios. All right, how many patrons want something? So if we've got a really less expensive title, something at like a 5 to 1, we'll get another copy of that. And then as things get more and more expensive, we simply can't afford to get very many copies. And that's going to lead to a lot longer wait times for most customers on these books. And maybe that's the publisher's aim. Make it so frustrating for people waiting when they've discovered a title through their library that they just end up going out to buy it. We're having to spend more and more money on previously owned materials. We used to own it. The license has lapsed. We don't own it anymore. And I'm seeing estimates from libraries across the country of at least 22 to over 35% of our this year's expenses are going to be things we already used to own. Finally, we're going to see less and less perpetual access content, things that we can keep for a long, long time. And it used to be that a collection would be 80% or even more of that. Now it's maybe 40% of your collection you've got access to, maybe only 20% you've got that long-term access to. There is some good news. There's some new license models. Recorded Books is offering a 100 circ license that is offering some pretty good deals. There's some good pay-per-use often on older titles. I'd like to thank the Digital Public Library of America for working with a number of medium and small-sized publishers to get us all kinds of options on any one title. So at the point of getting it, you can choose a license. If you think it'll be very popular, maybe you get one perpetual access and several metered, which are less expensive. So when that demand goes down, you've still got access to it, but you haven't paid the full price for all these perpetual access titles. For the first time through the DPLA, Amazon and Audible content is available, and it was not available until 2 years ago. Look at something like the Black Caucus of the American Library Association Self-Published Ebook Award, or the Indie Author Project. We're starting to see a lot of development there. DPLA in the Palace Marketplace has about 300,000 indie author titles. The most important thing there is that they're starting to review some of them and help you discover what will be a very desirable and perhaps very popular title, maybe even create the next best-selling author. But until we had sort of reviews of those, and with the Indie Author Project that's been going on a little bit, it was hard to know what you'd want to get from that huge sort of corpus of the indie author works. So what are we going to do to try to change this situation? We've tried federal legislation. It was introduced, or it was conceived of, in Rhode Island, but as soon as the publishing industry got word of it, they put heavy pressure on. It's not gone anywhere. Ultimately, we're going to have to get to the federal level and look at some possible adjustments to copyright to include libraries in a digital age, but that's going to be a tough fight. We have tried talking with the publishers. They can't all talk together. They're concerned about price fixing. We've talked to them with the ALA for years and years, and the deals just keep getting worse and worse. We cannot rely on them out of the goodness of their heart to make changes. So that's where state legislation has come in. We'll talk more about it in depth later, but I will say that I was involved with the Maryland law, which most of you have probably heard of. It didn't stand up to a challenge in federal court, but it's been important for a couple of reasons. We've learned from that law. We can use it as an example of what not to do as we move forward. I will say that state efforts, and there are efforts in several states, and a shout out to Stacy. Aloha, Stacy from Hawaii. I saw that you were here. Hawaii is pushing a bill forward, for example. Massachusetts is pushing a bill forward. And there's a whole group now that have formed what they call Protect the Creative Economy that are calling us, saying basically these nefarious anti-copyright forces are trying to destroy the publishing industry. What we really need is a BS per inch detector on that website there, because there's lie after lie after lie. It will not go unchallenged. So if you're a librarian, be a tastemaker. Look at medium, small, and indie publishing, especially at Palace. Be a publisher of your own indie authors. Adopt and support controlled digital lending. Try to get your state to move forward with the bill. And if you can't do that, let's say Massachusetts passes its bill. It's not going to tell the publishers what you've got to do this. That's what was considered unconstitutional. It's going to say, okay, fine. But if you're going to license the libraries in Massachusetts, here are the terms you've got to have. There's nothing unconstitutional about that. And the publishers don't play and they say, Massachusetts, we don't care, then you as a library consider, I stand with Massachusetts. I stand with the states that pass these bills. If they're not licensing, I'm not licensing. Finally, tell your library readers, we are working on a national website which will be getting this story out. I hope we'll have that launched within a couple of months. And that's what I had for you.